Welcome back to another episode of Health is Wealth. And thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. And as always, I am beyond grateful and thankful to each and every one of you who is tuning into today's podcast and tuning in to this episode. And as every week, I'm sharing a new episode, just sharing some words and thoughts of inspiration and motivation, just things that I'm going through on my own journey in life, on this crazy ride that we call life, things that I'm just learning for the first time, things that I just see at a different point of view in life now in hopes that it brings value into your life. And so once again, just wanted to thank you for being here. And as the time of this recording, it is Halloween, so super excited. We got decorations set up. A couple hours here, we're gonna have all the kids running around in the streets, so that's gonna be super fun. With that though, what I want to talk to you about on this week's episode is this quote I heard earlier, and I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but I just do like, when I heard it, what it kind of meant. And again, I don't know where the origins of this is, and I got it from a short clip I was watching, I believe on Instagram when I heard this. But it was this guy who was getting interviewed, and what he had said that his grandpa would tell him was that when we are born, we look like our parents. But when we die, we look like our decisions. And I thought to myself, man, this is really deep, right? I'll repeat that again. When we are born, we look like our parents. When we die, we look like our decisions. And what that really made me think of was that, obviously when we're born, we have no control of circumstances we're born into, families you're born into, where you grew up, how you grew up, your environment, all these different things, And up until the point of when you're 18, that's really the reality of what that is. You have no control, your minors, your kids, based on decisions that your parents, family, surrounding people or whatever the environment that you grew up, you're pretty much just kind of bound to what that is. But then there's a switchover point, right? We all know what that is. That's when you turn 18. And pretty much all that at that point then becomes, it's all up to us. It's all up to you. It's all up to me. It's all up to everyone to make their certain decisions and choices in life of things they do, past they go down, doing the right things, doing the wrong things. And when you think about this, when you look at, I guess, overall in the lifespan of our lifetime of growing up and living and getting older, growing up when we're adolescents and minors, there's really such this little piece and timeline of what we, again, really can't control, because there's so much of what happened before we were born that led up to what we were in when we were born that we couldn't have controlled, right? We weren't around for any of the decision makings and process of things that are going on in life. But when you look at life timeline as it is, it's only a small part of what we can't control. When you turn 18 and hopefully you live a long life, there's so much of what we can control. And there's a point to when you get there that it's like, maybe before then, you can blame, not blame, but, you can really say, hey, there's nothing in my control. Yeah, I wasn't a part of the decisions in the environments that I was in and life choices that were going on, and really had no control of why I'm here or how you grew up or the circumstances that you were in growing up. But once you get 18, it all goes out the door, right? It's like everything is on us at that point. The decisions that we make, the things that we do or we don't do. And then you've got, hopefully, again, this long life to live. And so when I thought about that quote, again, I've got to really figure out where it came from. It says, when you're born, you look like your parents. When you die, you look like your decisions. And that just really seems to hold true, because after that point, everything that we do or don't do, and who we are and aren't is really up to us. Nobody has control over that anymore. It's always up to us to make those decisions. And that's truly what it's going to look like when we get to the end of life, If God allows, right? We don't know how long we're going to be here. Nobody does, right? Sometimes we are very fortunate. People live their entire life. Sometimes things don't happen that way, and things can happen, right? But with God's grace, hopefully we all live that long life. So the point I'm making here is this. You get to that end of life, you get to many years of life lived after, and you have to look back and realize that everything you are, everything you've become, everything you did or didn't do at that point was really the sum of everything from the point of when you had control, right? of your life, and it's all the sum up of who you are and your life choices and where you're at then. All of that then became the choices that you made at a certain point. And so all this is really just a reminder of just that, though. Each and every single day we are all accountable for the choices that we make, good or bad, for pursuing the things that we want to, and all that comes in between them. And there really isn't anybody else to blame. I know it's very easy for us to try to find ways to, say, well, it's because of this that I'm not here. It's because of that that I'm not here. But as an adult, as we are of age and we have control over circumstances, there's nobody else to blame, for places we might not be. If there are certain places we want to be, or, perhaps you're not the most satisfied with your life choices or your lifestyle. Maybe you don't have all the money that you want. Maybe you don't have the body that you want. Maybe you don't have the materials that you want, or you're working the kind of jobs that you want, whatever it could be, right? When we think of all the things that this can come down to, there's really nobody else that we can hold accountable but ourselves. And so again, as I think about that, it really does become this bigger window in life that, we're granted that ability, that opportunity through God to be like, we can make any decision at any time, in any second of any day and moment. And whether we choose to exercise that right or not is really up to us. But when we think about, again, there's only so much in our life that we couldn't have controlled when we were young, and how we were born and we were born into. Everything once you turn 18, it's up to everybody to then make their own choices. And so when you get to that end point in life, it really does become that, right? Like, you think of people who are in their elderly years now, they're a lot older. I mean, you have to really think everything that they are, right, wherever they are at in life. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad place, but it's just, we have to realize that everywhere we end up at a certain point in life, and looking back when we get older, we're really going to be, summed up to the choices we've made over the years. And so for me, just thinking about that reminds myself that, the things that I want to do, the things I want to achieve, the past and all that I want to go down, any of whatever it is in my life is going to be up to me. It's not going to be up to anybody else. It isn't anybody else's responsibility, but my own, because God gives us all that individual life and opportunity for a reason, to design it, to create it, to build it the way that we want to. And, whether we end up in the places that we want to at the end of our time here or we don't, ultimately, everything and all the decisions between the time that we were able to make them by ourselves, right, to that time of when we have to look back and reflect and just see where we've been in life and what we did with our time, and the past that we went down, and the things that we became, and the things that we achieved or didn't achieve. Like, all that reflection is really only going to be based off of those things and all of the decisions that we made. And so hopefully this just serves as a reminder, right, that we're not on autopilot, that every day, every 24 hours that, we're grateful to have, through God, that, and we should use it, every day, that opportunity to make those choices, so that ultimately, for me, I believe, like, the big thing, looking at life, right? Like, I truly believe the true definition of success is just ending up in life where you want to and where you're happy at, right? I don't think it's necessarily a level of, how much money you got, how many things you got, whatever it could be, right? Success and happiness is defined differently for everybody, because it all means something different to any and everybody, right? There isn't one standard I truly believe means, okay, you are successful in life, other than, are you happy with where you're at, with the choices that you're making, with who you are, with, the things that are going on in your life, right? Now and in the future. And that's truly, like, at the most simplistic, basic, I think, just definition of it truly is success, right? Are you where you want it to be at? Are you content with your life? Are you happy with your choices? Are you happy where you're going, where you're ending up, and all of that? And I think that is the ultimate goal at the end of our life. And again, to get to that goal, to get to that point, to be able to reflect and look back, is only going to come down to, did you make decisions with the time that you had, with this majority span? We all get that full long life. Did you make the decisions that, that aligned with the things that made you happy, content, give you joy, becoming a certain person, doing certain things as careers, ending up in certain places, whatever it could be. It looks different for everyone, right? But with that, looking back, I think it's important for us to look forward, understanding that a lot of times we make decisions day to day, right? And we don't really see, even if we don't consciously make certain decisions or whatever it is, we don't really see the outcome of it for some time. Sometimes things we do or don't do right now, you may not see how it could direct your life, redirect it. It might, take you down certain paths, create a certain person with you, whatever it could be. A lot of times we don't see it until, you start building, a different path, a different route in life, and so it's very easy to dismiss like the day-to-day decisions, not really seem like they're like a whole big deal, like there's much to them, because we don't really see them until we look back 5 years, 10 years, and think about all the things we did with our time and our efforts and our energy and things we decided to do or not do, or choices that we made or didn't make, and all of that. And so a lot of times it's hard seeing forward, right? How that could impact us. But I think we just all have to have this surreal moment to know that at some point we're going to have to look back at everything we've done, to all the choices that we've made and all the choices that we didn't make, and just really look at life and be like, did we end up where we really wanted to end up? Did we make the choices that we were content and happy with to get us in a spot to where we can look back and be like, okay, cool. We all fail. We all make mistakes. Nobody's perfect, right? But I think overall, if we could, in the majority of the decision makings in life, ultimately get us somewhere where we're happy with, then that's the biggest piece to all of this, right? And so that's why it's like, thinking about that quote, like, when you're born, you have no control over that. That's just what it is. But when we die, we have every control of how our life turned out. Sure, there's things that we can't control in society, economy, all these other things. That's understandable, right? But we can control a lot of our day-to-day decisions on who we want to be, the lifestyle we want to live, the things that we have in life, the things that we achieve in life. There's so many things that are within our control, And if we get to that end of point in life where we're like, this is not quite where I want it to be, then who else could there have been to blame but our own, whether we wasted too much time not doing anything here, or didn't, take some risk or chances over here, or, have the courage to pursue that thing that we always envisioned maybe we wanted to do one day, and whatever it may be, right? And some of that all looking back becomes, we are the decisions, of our life when we die. And that's pretty much, what it comes down to, right? And so again, I guess all of this just constantly reminding ourselves that even though when we make decisions in the moment, we don't realize how it could impact, the future of where we're going and who we're becoming and what we're doing. It's very crucial to think about these things, become more intentional with the time that we've got every day, because we don't know how much time we've got here. We never know. Nobody knows that but God, right? And it's important, to look at every little decision as it's creating a certain path. It's creating a certain identity. It's creating a certain future for us, in hopes that if we can just try to have some, foresight and just, think a little bit more cautiously with the decisions that we make and the choices that we make, then hopefully it'll guide us closer to where we can get older. We can look back and be like, okay, cool. Like, this is where, I ended up because I made the choices and I did the things that got me to here, and I'm happy, and again, I think that's the biggest and ultimate goal, right? So no matter what it might look like for everyone, because it's all going to be different, I think it's just a great, great quote. I have to find out who said it first, but, again, we can't help how and where we were born, but we can always help how you change things in life, how you, could look back and be like, hey, this is the life I created. This is the life that I built. This is the life that I wanted. These are the things that make me happy. I am happy with who I became and all those things, because it's important. Everybody's going to have to get to that point in life where we have to answer to, what do we do with our life, right? So much you couldn't control, but there was so much that could have been controlled, right? And whether we use those opportunities and choices to better ourselves or not, not, it's going to be up to everybody, whether they exercise, again, those rights and opportunities to that. But nonetheless, there's going to be a reality that everybody faces, and it's, you have to look back and be like, okay, I ended up nowhere near where I had wanted to, thought I would, hope to, or whatever. Or you're going to be on the other side of that where, someone's going to be like, okay, like, I'm here, I'm happy, I'm content. I made the choices that made me happy. I went down the path that made me happy, and all of that. So no more to this conversation than just to remind ourselves how important it is to take seriously every single day, that we're here, the choices that we're making. Are we making choices that are going to better us as a person, better our future, get us in a direction that we want to, every day? Are we going to, muster up a little bit of courage to pursue the things that might scare us? Perhaps it's a dream, perhaps, it's something you envision, something that you would like to try to do, or something you like to try to become in life, so that we don't have to have those regrets later on in life, because although a lot of times certain things could be scary, I can't imagine anything that's going to be any scarier than to look back and be like, gosh, I could have done that. What would life have been if I would have made those choices that would have got me somewhere to where I wanted to be, right? Because that, again, is the ultimate goal above and all, is just ending up where you want to be. It's not where people make you feel you need to be, what the world of society says you've got to be. It's where you want to be, and that's where you're going to find peace and happy and joy, and feel like you're living in the purpose of what you wanted to do with your life. That's our God-given right and our individual right to live that and to be that, and not it being defined by anybody else around us or the world other than ourselves and what that means to us. And it's always going to look different for everyone, because I truly believe everyone has a different purpose. So, this is just to remind us once again, with every decision that we make, we're carving a future for ourselves. And the hope is that we're all, carving a future that we can look back at and just be like, hey, the decisions I made, created this future and this destination for me. And it's where I want it to be. It's what makes me happy. And I'm glad I ended up here, versus sometimes we're oblivious to these things. Maybe we want to pretend it's just not going to happen to us, old age and getting older and ending up, the spot where we have to turn back and reflect. And I think a lot of people are just so stuck on autopilot. The days are going to go on, and it's like the older you get, the thing you got to realize, time just flies by a lot quicker. So if we're not intentional about the choices that we're making, the directions that we're going, the things that we want to be in life, time is just going to happen. It doesn't care if you're ready for it or not, if you're paying attention or not. That's not how life works. When you get older, you get busier, and time just seems to fly by a lot faster. It feels like almost yesterday I was 20. I just turned 40, right? And so this is just a good reminder for us all to be very intentional every day. Just realizes that we're going to get to that point when we're older. And when we die, we're going to die, looking like the decisions that we made in life, whether we regretted them or not, ended up in the place we wanted to or not. And that's pretty much all it's going to be summed up to. But at that point, there would have been nobody else to blame if we don't end up where we want to when we get older, other than ourselves, because it was never anybody else's responsibility once we became an adult than us to figure out what we wanted to be, what we wanted to do, the life we wanted to live and create, where we wanted to end up, and all those things that would have defined our own individual, definition of success and being happy and having peace and living the life that we wanted, right? So thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode. Hopefully that helped you guys. As always, I will see you on the next one.